They've been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize and are the subject of a new documentary on Netflix. The White Helmets, also known as the Syria Civil Defence, are a group of volunteers who were the first to arrive at the scene of an airstrike, and they claim to have saved the lives of more than 60,000 people in Syria. This week, after a convoy of aid trucks near Aleppo was bombed, White Helmet volunteers and the US government blamed Russia for the attack. The Russians, meanwhile, have accused the White Helmets of working with controversial Syrian rebel groups. Joining me now from New York is Farouq al-Habib, spokesman for the White Helmets. Farouq, thanks for joining me on UpFront. The Russians say they not only did they not carry out an attack on the convoy, they say there was no air attack on the convoy at all. The trucks just caught on fire, and they're questioning the testimonies of White Helmet volunteers. They say you're biased towards the rebels. What's your response to them?
Actually, our response will be, as ever, focusing on the work to rescue the Syrian people from under rubble. We know that there are always political games trying to politicize everything happening in Syria, but our humanitarian message is obvious and clear for everybody. It's working impartially and neutrally to help all the Syrian people wherever and whenever the White Helmets teams are allowed to respond to attacks in any area in Syria. They will be always ready to help. The attack on the UN convoys was obvious for everybody that it was deliberate. The nature and the objective of those convoys were clear, and it's obvious that there was airstrikes on the convoys.
How many of your volunteers, of White Helmet volunteers, have lost their lives in this conflict so far?
Till now, 134 volunteers were killed while they were conducting rescue operations in Syria, and most of them were killed by Russian and regime airstrikes, actually.
The New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof wrote last year that the work of your organization is, quote, a reminder of the human capacity for courage, strength and resilience. He said the work of the White Helmets is the one uplifting story out of Syria. What is it that drives your volunteers on the ground, that propels them to do this life-saving but very dangerous work?
The White Helmets are from the Syrian people and working for the Syrian people. The hope of saving innocent Syrians is the main motivation for all team members who belong to the same communities who suffer from the airstrikes, explosions, besiegement, and all the humanitarian crisis in Syria. Saving one life is saving the humanity. This is the motto of the White Helmets.
Is the White Helmets dedicated to saving the lives of all Syrians or just Syrians on the opposition side? Because some of your critics say, hold on, you're in bed with the rebels. A lot of them on social media are posting pictures of White Helmet volunteers, allegedly alongside, quote-unquote jihadist fighters. I'm sure you've seen the pictures that have circulated on Twitter and Facebook. What do you say in response to those controversial claims by some of your critics?
Under very complicated and difficult circumstances in Syria, 3,000 volunteers of the White Helmets are working to help the Syrian people, all the Syrian people. The code of conduct of the White Helmets or the Syria Civil Defence is very clear. Zero tolerance for affiliation or relation with any armed or political groups in Syria.
And just to be clear also, you say you're an impartial organization, but you yourself, back in 2011, you founded the Homs Revolutionary Council. You were part of that initial uprising against Assad back in the day. You were part of that non-violent opposition, weren't you? And I think you were detained and even tortured by the Assad regime.
Yes, and everybody knows, even Bashar al-Assad himself admitted that the Syrian revolution started peacefully, and for several months there were no armed resistance in Syria. So for us, when we started the Syrian revolution, that was a pure humanitarian message defending the human rights of the Syrian people.
But today, neither you nor the White Helmets are involved in any Syrian opposition groups.
No, not at all.
When the uprising against Assad began in 2011 that you were part of, did you think it would still be going on? The fighting would still be going on 5 years later? Assad would still be in power?
No, actually, nobody expected that it will take that long, and nobody expected that we will face that ignorance from the international community. And nobody expected that the regime will be so brutal and there will be so extremist groups trying to take control over Syria. The Syrian people moved just like what other people in the Middle East moved by the Arab Spring, calling for human rights and freedom.
You're in New York attending UNGA, the UN General Assembly meetings. What is your message, especially on the issue of humanitarian aid and the Syrian refugees who are fleeing the violence in such huge numbers? What is your message to the UN, to the international community, especially to Western governments on that particular issue?
Our main message: solve the problem at the source. Of course, we are grateful for the assistance provided for the Syrian refugees in hosting countries, but we don't see the solution by hosting more refugees or offering more assistance. The solution is by solving the problem at the source and addressing the roots of the problem and ensuring protection, safety, and respect of human rights of the Syrian people at their hometowns and their country.
Farouq al-Habib, thanks for joining me on UpFront. That's our show. UpFront will be back next week.